Today, we're going to talk about a showdown in history that wasn't fought with swords or cannons, but with something way, way sharper: wit. This is the story of a battle of ideas that completely reshaped what liberty means, and it all kicked off with one brilliant and absolutely hilarious book.
So let me ask you this. It's a question that's just as real today as it was hundreds of years ago. When you're up against a dangerous, intolerant idea that's actually gaining power, how do you fight it? How do you stop it in its tracks?
Well, the answer, as this story shows, is pretty incredible. You don't just argue with a bad idea. You beat it with a better one, a sharper one, and in this case, a much, much funnier one. You basically take your opponent's arguments and turn them into a punchline.
All right, so picture this. We're going back to 17th century England. This period is called the Restoration, and the dust from a really brutal civil war had barely even settled. The whole country was on a knife's edge, totally divided over politics and, maybe most of all, religion.
But here's the thing. The biggest battles of the day weren't being fought on an actual battlefield. Nope. They were being fought in print. Pamphlets, books. These were the real weapons in a war for the very soul of England.
And right at the center of this whole mess was a guy named Samuel Parker. He was a high-ranking church official, and he became the main mouthpiece for intolerance. He argued that the government should have total control over what people were allowed to believe.
And the conflict was pretty black and white. On one side, you had the powerful Anglican Church, that's Parker's side, demanding that everyone follow a single, state-approved religion, no exceptions. On the other side, you had the dissenters, think groups like the Puritans, who were basically just asking for the freedom to follow their own conscience. Parker put all his arguments down in these really aggressive books. He wasn't just disagreeing with people. He was saying the government had a duty to actually persecute them. He said freedom of conscience was a danger to the nation, and the only way forward was absolute obedience. It was basically a manifesto for tyranny.
But Parker's ideas didn't just go unanswered. See, there was this poet who was also a member of Parliament named Andrew Marvell, and he decided to fight back. But he chose a weapon that was way more devastating than just another angry pamphlet. He chose satire. He wrote a book called The Rehearsal Transpros'd, and you know what? The title itself was a stroke of genius. To transpose is an old word that means to turn something completely inside out, to reverse it. And that was Marvell's entire strategy right there in the title. He was going to take Parker's arguments and flip them right on their head. His method was this simple, brilliant three-step move. First, he'd rehearse. He'd just calmly repeat Parker's super pompous arguments. Then he'd transpose them. He'd twist them and flip them with humor. And finally, that process would expose just how cruel and ridiculous Parker's ideas really were.
But don't get me wrong, this wasn't just about getting a few laughs. Marvell had a deadly serious mission here. He was writing to defend religious liberty, to expose hypocrisy, and to protect the fundamental right to think for yourself from the grip of tyranny. So how did he do it? What was the secret sauce that made this book so devastatingly effective? Okay, let's open up Marvell's arsenal of wit and take a look.
His number one weapon was irony. He wouldn't attack Parker head-on. No, he would praise him. He'd clap for Parker's grand ideas and his brilliant logic, all while making Parker's own arrogance the real punchline.
So, for instance, he'd congratulate Parker on this vision for a unified country under one religion, and then he'd calmly walk the reader through what that actually meant in practice: violence, suppression, and state-sponsored cruelty. That fake praise just made the ugly reality hit so much harder.
You have to realize this was a totally revolutionary approach. Most political writing back then was just bitter and angry. Marvell's book felt light, conversational, and it was genuinely funny. He was inviting you to laugh along with him, and in doing that, he made you think. So, what happened? What was the result of this satirical masterpiece? Well, the impact was huge, and it was immediate. It was an absolute knockout blow, not just to Samuel Parker, but to his entire ideology.
The Rehearsal Transpros'd became an instant bestseller. I mean, everyone was reading it, talking about it, and laughing at it. And poor Samuel Parker, his reputation was completely destroyed. He went from being this feared, powerful voice to a public joke. He never recovered.
But its influence was so much bigger than just taking down one guy. Marvell basically created the blueprint for modern English satire. All the literary giants who came after him, we're talking Jonathan Swift, the guy behind Gulliver's Travels, and poets like Alexander Pope, they all built on the model that Marvell pioneered.
He proved that calm, witty humor could be the most powerful political weapon of them all.
So why are we still talking about a 350-year-old book? Because it became one of history's strongest arguments for the freedoms we care so much about today: free speech, religious liberty, and putting real limits on government power. It established once and for all that satire isn't just a joke. It can be a powerful, powerful tool for changing the world.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Andrew Marvell proved that sometimes the best way to fight intolerance isn't with more anger, but with laughter. It really makes you wonder, in our own time of deep division, when is humor the most powerful and maybe the most necessary form of protest we have?